Hey, folks, what's going on? This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Amazon.com. If you're going to shop at Amazon, help the podcast out as well. Go to lookingbackpodcast.com and click the Amazon banner on the front page, and out of whatever you spend, they send back a percentage to me. That's a great way to help the show out. We're also brought to you by PayPal.com. If you wish to donate to the podcast, that link is available on the website as well. Just click that donate button. That takes you to the PayPal page where you can enter in whatever amount you wish to donate. All donations are greatly appreciated, and all donations get to help create content for future shows. We're going to continue our series on Iron Maiden. We're going to talk about 3 albums. I've decided to split the Bruce Dickinson section into pieces because he's put out a lot of stuff when he first joined Maiden. We're going to talk about 3 of my favorite albums from them. The first one is quite possibly one of the greatest Iron Maiden albums of all time. So come with me. We're going to take a look back at Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast. Thanks for listening. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Looking Back, where we take a look back at interesting things in the past. We're kind of getting away from history itself. We'll get back to that eventually. Just right now, I'm trying to branch things out, make things more interesting. We're continuing our series on Iron Maiden. The last episode, we talked about the first album and Killers, the 2 albums with Paul Dayano. We're going to talk about 3 Iron Maiden albums today with Bruce Dickinson. He's done a lot more, but I've decided to split this up into different episodes, 3 albums each, just to make it easier for you to enjoy. Because believe me, I could sit here for a couple of hours and just talk about each album that Bruce was on. Let's face it, that wouldn't be interesting. And that's what I'm trying to do, is make this interesting for you, to make it enjoyable. So, first off, thank you for listening. I really do appreciate that. And let's get right down to it. We're going to talk about the third album that came after Killers, came out in 1982. That album is probably one of the most popular Iron Maiden albums they've ever released, and that album is The Number of the Beast. That was released in March of '82, and it saw the debut of Bruce Dickinson on vocals, and it was the last album with drummer Clive Burr. It became their first album to reach number 1 in the UK and their first to be certified platinum in the US. That album produced 2 singles, the one that you heard, the little snippet, Run to the Hills, as well as The Number of the Beast, the former of which was the band's first top 10 single in the UK. The album was somewhat controversial, especially in the US, due to the religious nature of its lyrics and its artwork. Um, it's their only album to include songwriting credits from Clive Burr, and it was their first album to feature writing by guitarist Adrian Smith. Steve Harris adopted a different approach to writing, which would cater more to their new vocalist Bruce Dickinson, who was in a band called Samson. The album's producer Martin Birch said this, quote, "I simply didn't think Paul was capable of handling lead vocals on some of the quite complicated directions I knew Steve wanted to explore. When Bruce joined, it opened up the possibilities for the new album tremendously," end quote. According to several interviews, Dickinson was heavily involved in writing several of the album's songs, particularly the tracks Children of the Damned, The Prisoner, and Run to the Hills. But due to his previous contractual issues that were ongoing with his former band Samson, he could not legally take part in any songwriting for the album, and he had to make what he called a moral contribution, which meant he was able to influence particular tracks, but could not provide enough creative input so as to earn a writing credit. The recording and mixing of this album had to be completed in only 5 weeks after the band had spent too long constructing the new songs, and this was because the group was for the first time creating an album from scratch, with very little material written prior to their pre-production stage. Music press reports told stories of unexplained phenomenon that occurred during the recording sessions at Battery Studios, such as lights turning on and off on their own, record gear breaking down mysteriously. And this all climaxed when Birch was involved in a car accident, and he was involved in an accident with a truckload of nuns, or yeah, a bus full of nuns, and so that kind of made him go, okay, well, hold on, wait a minute. So, oh, and by the way, the bill for the repairs was 666 pounds. Yeah. Run to the Hills was released as a single on February 12th, 1982, and it was released 2 weeks before their UK tour, acting as somewhat of a preview for the forthcoming album, which wouldn't be released until 2 days after the British tour ended. So released alongside a music video, which was made using live footage and clips from several Buster Keaton films. The single performed remarkably well, earning the band their first top 10 single in the UK. And as they were rushing to complete the album in time, as well as record and mix the single for an even earlier release, they hastily selected Total Eclipse as a B-side. Now, as they had written too much material, they had to choose between Total Eclipse and Gangland for the single, for the B-side to go with Run to the Hills, with the understanding that the other song would make it onto the album. So, several band members have expressed regret over that decision, with Steve Harris saying, quote, "We just chose the wrong track as the B-side. I think if Total Eclipse had been on the album instead of Gangland, it would have been far better." End quote. On top of this, Harris has stated that the opening track, Invaders, to him wasn't good enough, saying that, quote, "It could have been replaced with something a bit better, only we didn't have anything else to replace it with at the time. We just had enough time to do what we did, and that was it." End quote. Now, while the title track, The Number of the Beast, is considered by many religious groups as evidence that Iron Maiden were a satanic band, the song in fact was inspired by a nightmare that Steve Harris had, which was triggered by watching Damien the Omen 2 late at night. He also states that the lyrics were influenced by Robert Burns' Tam O'Shanter. The track opens with a spoken introduction from the Book of Revelation, which is read by actor Barry Clayton. And according to Dickinson, the band approached Vincent Price to record that passage, but they asked Clayton when Vincent Price insisted on a fee of £25,000. Although the liner notes claim that the passage is from Revelations 13:18, the first line comes from Revelations 12:12. The closing song, "Hallowed Be Thy Name," uh, has remained in all but one of the set list during the album's recording, the only exception being the Made in England tour in 2012 to 2014. Um, the track is probably the most celebrated of their epic songs. Tells the story of a prisoner about to be hung. It features some of Harris's more philosophical lyrics, and several band members have since stated that it's one of their favorite tracks, with Dickinson describing it as, quote, "fantastic," and that performing it live is like narrating a movie to the audience. And a live version was released in '93, which gained them another top 10 placement in the UK singles chart. The song "Children of the Damned" is based on the films Village of the Damned and Children of the Damned, which in turn were adapted from a novel, The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. On his last radio show for BBC Radio 6, during a segment to a tribute to Ronnie James Dio, Dickinson mentioned that Children of the Damned was inspired by Black Sabbath's song that Dio is on, Children of the Sea. The Prisoner was inspired by the uh, TV show of the same name that was in Britain. It features dialogue from the title sequence, and their manager, Rod Smallwood, had to telephone Patrick McGoohan to ask permission to use audio clips for the song, and was extremely hesitant during his conversation, with whom Smallwood himself described as a real bona fide superstar actor. McGoohan was reported to have said, quote, "What did you say the name was? A rock band, you say? Do it." And so Iron Maiden later made another song based on the series called Back in the Village from '84's album Power Slave. 22 Acacia Avenue is the second song in the Charlotte the Harlot saga, which was originally written by Adrian Smith several years earlier while playing in his old band Urchin. According to Smith, Steve Harris remembered hearing the song at an Urchin concert in a local park and modified it for the Number of the Beast album. The album was strongly opposed by social conservatives, especially in the US, when Iron Maiden was accused of being Satanists. Public burnings of their catalog was organized. Some religious groups smashed the records with hammers to them for fear of inhaling fumes from burning vinyl. The Beast on the Road tour was subject to boycotts and demonstrations. Venues were sometimes surrounded by activists who handed out leaflets, and in one case, a 25-foot cross was carried in protest. Harris has stated, quote, "It was mad. They simply got me wrong. They simply got the wrong end of the stick. They obviously hadn't read the lyrics. They just wanted to believe all that rubbish about us being Satanists." End quote. Since the release, it's received critical acclaim. All Music discriminated as easily among one of the top 5 most essential heavy metal albums ever recorded. Sputnik Music called it a classic in the world of metal. BBC Music praised its complex arrangement, stating that, quote, "Whereas even some of the venerable HM institutions," HM being heavy metal thinking Black Sabbath, "would struggle to make material that was more than a collection of minor key riffs, Iron Maiden pulled its feet off with considerable elan." Q Magazine placed the album at number 100 in its list of the 100 greatest British albums ever. In the year 2000, 2001, it named it one of the 50 heaviest albums of all time. 2006, it placed it at number 40 in its 40 best albums of the 80s list. Classic Rock placed it at number 15 in their list of 100 greatest British rock albums. It was voted number 1 by HMV in their list of the best British albums of the past 60 years in 2012. The Number of the Beast is one of 2 Iron Maiden records listed in Robert Dimery's book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die, the 1980 album Iron Maiden being the other one. In the year 2001, the BBC made a documentary about The Number of the Beast as part of the Classic Album series, which was released on DVD on the same year. Like all Iron Maiden artwork during the 80s and 90s, it was painted by a man named Derek Riggs. The cover was originally created for the song Purgatory, but Rod Smallwood deemed it of too high a caliber for a single release and decided to save it for the Number of the Beast album instead. The original '82 artwork included a blue sky in the background. This was a mistake by the printers of the album cover and was later rectified and became black when the album was remastered for a CD release in 1998. The album was a center of controversy, particularly in America, due to the lyrics of the title track and the cover art depicting Eddie controlling Satan like a puppet, while Satan is also controlling a smaller Eddie. Smallwood explains that the concept was to, quote, "ask who the real evil one is here, who manipulates who." And according to Riggs, this was inspired by a Doctor Strange comic book, which had some big villain with Doctor Strange dangling on some string like a puppet. It was something I read as a child back in the 1960s, I think. While the images of hell were taken from my knowledge of medieval European Christian art, which was full of such scenes, end quote. The album cover artwork has been parodied several times, um, once by the crossover thrash band Stormtroopers of Death for the artwork for the '99 album Bigger Than the Devil, and also it was parodied on a t-shirt by streetwear brand Diamond Supply Company. Um, Dream Theater in 2002 played the album in its entirety in Paris, France. The performance was recorded and has been released during the band's through the band's label, Itzy Jam Records. Um, it really is just a fantastic album. The album was reissued in '98 by EMI and Sanctuary Columbia in the U.S. as an enhanced version, which included photos band history, and music videos for Number of the Beast and Run to the Hills. In addition, Total Eclipse, which was restored to the album's track listing, having been excluded to the original version due to space constraints. This version mistakenly lists the track lengths for 22 Acacia Avenue and Number of the Beast as 449 and 350 respectively. They are in fact 638 and 451. The version that I have has both Gangland and Total Eclipse, and it really is one of my all-time favorite albums. Um, in the U.S., it was certified platinum. In the UK, it was certified platinum. In Canada, it was certified platinum 3 times in a row, or triple platinum. It's really just a great, great album. Um, One of my all-time favorite Iron Maiden albums. And this next one that we're going to talk about is, like I said, another just a really, really great, great Iron Maiden album. This next album we're going to talk about is their 1983 release called Peace of Mind. Peace of Mind is their fourth album, was released in 83 by EMI, by Capitol in Canada and the US, and it was reissued later by Sanctuary Columbia. It was their first album to feature drummer Nico McBrain, who had recently left the Paris-based band Trust and has been Iron Maiden's drummer ever since. It was a critical and commercial success, reaching number 3 in the UK charts and achieving platinum in the UK and North America. In December of '82, Clive Burr ended his association with the band due to personal and tour schedule problems, and was replaced by Nico McBrain, who used to play for the French band Trust, as well as Pat Travers and Streetwalkers. Soon afterwards, the band went to Jersey to compose the songs, taking over the Hotel Le Chalet as it was out of season, and rehearsed in its restaurant. In February, they journeyed to the Bahamas for the first time to record the album at Nassau's Compass Point Studios. Recordings were finished in March, and it was mixed afterwards at Electric Lady Studios in New York. This is the first of 4 Iron Maiden albums that was not named after a song featured on the album itself, though the lyrics in the song Still Life contain the expression peace of mind. Originally, the record's working title was Food for Thought, and once the band decided that Eddie would be lobotomized on the front cover, until the band came up with the title Peace of Mind, Piece, in a pub in Jersey during the uh, album's writing stage. The liner notes include a slightly altered version from the Book of Revelation, and actually says it's kind of a slightly altered version. Saying, God shall wipe away the tears from their eyes, there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall be any more brain, for the former things are passed away. It's actually a pun on the album's title, and the actual verse is, neither shall there be any more pain, but it's just a play on words for the title. In the lowercase on the back side of the album cover, there is a message saying, quote, no synthesizers or ulterior motives. Lyrically, the album largely reflects the group's literary interests, such as the song To Tame a Strange Land is inspired by Frank Herbert's book Dune, which came out in 1965. Sun and Steel is based on Yukio Mishima's 1968 essay about the samurai Miyamoto Musashi. Still Life is influenced by Ramsey Campbell's 1964 short story The Inhabitant of the Lake. The song The Trooper that little clip that you heard, is inspired by Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade, which came out in 1854. Film influences are present in this album as well, such as the song Where Eagles Dare, which is based on the Brian Hutton 1968 film, scripted by Alistair MacLean. The song Quest for Fire is based on the 1981 film by Jean-Jacques Annaud. And on top of this, Revelations, which is written by Dickinson, includes lines from the J.K. Chesterton hymn, O God of Earth and Altar. While the remainder of the song is influenced by Aleister Crowley, more exotic influences include Greek mythology, somewhat slightly altered for their song Flight of Icarus. To Tame a Land was meant to be entitled Dune, after the novel, but after seeking permission from Frank Herbert's agents, the band received a message which stated, quote, Frank Herbert doesn't like rock bands, particularly heavy metal, and especially bands like Iron Maiden, and were forced to change the name. At the beginning of the sixth track, Still Life, the band included a hidden message, which could only be understood by playing it backwards. This was a joke and was intended as a swing back to critics who said that the band was satanic. The backward message features McBrain mimicking actor John Bird's impression of Idi Amin, uttering the following phrase, quote, Well, who said the thing with three bones, do not meddle with things you don't understand, followed by a belch. According to McBain, quote, We were sick and tired of being labeled as devil worshippers and all the bollocks by these fucking morons in the States, so we thought, right, you want to take the piss, we'll show you how to take the bleeding piss, my son. And one of the boys taped me in the studio of this Idi Amin routine I used to do when I had a few drinks. I remember it distinctly ending with the words, Don't meddle with things you don't understand. And we thought if people were going to be stupid about this sort of thing, we might as well give them something to be really stupid about. End quote. It was released in May 28th of 1983, was preceded by the single Flight of Icarus in April, and the supporting tour, World Peace Tour, opened at Hull City Hall. The tour concluded on December 18th, following 139 shows in total. And in North America, the album reached the number 14 chart in the Billboard 200. It was certified gold in July by the RIAA and was certified platinum in '86. The reviews were mostly positive. Kerrang labeled it, published a poll of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time, and then album ranked number 1, followed by Number of the Beast at number 2. Um, it is just one of those classic Iron Maiden albums, just like the third and final album we're going to talk about with Bruce Dickinson. Like I said, I split this up into 3 albums just to make it a little easier to read about, to listen to. The third album we're going to talk about is the album that actually introduced me to Iron Maiden, and that album is Power Slave. Power Slave is the 5th album by Iron Maiden, released in September of 1984 on EMI in Europe and its sister label, Capitol Records, in North America. It's notable for the ancient Egyptian theme displayed on the artwork, lifted from the title track, which was carried over to the album supporting tour. It is the tour, which began in Poland in 1984 and is widely regarded as their longest and most arduous to date, and led to the live album Live After Death. The release also contains a musical retelling of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which uses pieces of the original poem as lyrics, and is furthermore Iron Maiden's longest song to date at 13 minutes and 40 seconds. It's also notable as the band's first album to feature the same lineup as the previous one, which would remain intact for 2 more future releases. Two songs were released as singles, the first being 2 Minutes to Midnight, that little clip that you heard, and the song Aces High. Following the conclusion of their highly successful World Peace Tour in December of '83, the band took 3 weeks off in January of '84. And as with Power Slave's predecessor, Peace of Mind, this was where most of their writing took place in New Jersey before the band began recording at Compass Point Studios in Nassau in the Bahamas. The Steve Harris said under time pressure, the song "Remember the Ancient Mariner" was written in a relatively short space of time, influenced by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, his poem of the same name. The song directly quotes two passages from the poem, the former including the famous line, "Water, water, everywhere, not a drop to drink." And at over 13 minutes long, it contains several distinct sections with differing moods, and it would become a fan favorite. During the 2009 tour, Somewhere Back in Time World Tour, guitarist Dave Murray, Bruce Dickinson, and Steve Harris said that the song is their favorite from that tour to play. Once finished, they took another short break while the album was mixed at Electric Lady Studios in New York before reconvening in Fort Lauderdale in Florida to rehearse for the World Slavery Tour. The tour began in Poland in August of '84, ended in California in late 1985, and that stage set was a real eye-opener. Echoing the album cover includes monumental pedestals several stories high, on top of which the musicians would appear at times during the show. The set amply filled even the gigantic proscenium at Radio City Music Hall, and it was the first time a heavy metal band had taken a full set behind the Iron Curtain, visiting Poland and Hungary, which was a landmark achievement at the time. They continued into South America, where for the first time they played to an estimated audience of 300,000 people at the very first Rock in Rio as special guests, get this, of the band Queen. The Live After Death album and video, recorded over 4 nights at the Long Beach Arena in LA and the Hammersmith Odeon in London, was released and respectively peaked at number 2 and number 1 in the UK charts. Number 2 for the album, number 1 for the video. In total, the tour was 13 months long and touched 28 countries. And Power Slave debuted at number 2 in the UK as a result of their record company EMI's third "Now That's What I Call Music Pop" compilation. According to both Nico McBrain and Adrian Smith, Power Slave began making Iron Maiden famous, quote, "very fast, very quickly," such as in Brazil, where hundreds of fans waited outside hotels and restaurants for the band. Flash of the Blade was included on the soundtrack to Dario Argento's 1985 horror film Phenomena, and was covered by the band Avenged Sevenfold on their live double album, Live at the LBC and Diamonds in the Rough. Rhapsody of Fire, which is one of my favorite power metal bands, have recorded a cover that was featured on the deluxe edition of their album From Chaos to Eternity. The song Flash of the Blade can be heard in the Gem and the Holograms episode Kimber's Rebellion, just after the band members return home from Paris on a boombox stereo being played by a passerby. The tracks, you had Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Lost for Words, which is an instrumental, Flash of the Blade, The Duelist, Back in the Village, Power Slave, and then finally Rime of the Ancient Mariner. On the 1995 reissue, there was a bonus disc which had a B-side called Mission from Eri. You also had a Beckett cover called Rainbow's Gold and a Nectar cover called King of Midnight. And it also included a live version of Number of the Beast. It was reissued, re-released in 1998 with an extra multimedia section which featured music videos from Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight. Originally, the songs Back in the Village and Power Slave had a running time of 5:02 and 7:12 respectively, but when remastered, the introduction to Power Slave was merged with the end of Back in the Village, resulting in Power Slave's length being cut to 6:48 and Back in the Village being extended to 5:21. Also, in the remastered release, silences at the beginning and end of some tracks were cut, which caused the total length of the album to be cut down to 50 minutes and 34 seconds. The lineup for Power Slave was Bruce Dickinson on vocals, Dave Murray and Adrian Smith on guitar, Steve Harris on bass, Nico McBrain on drums, and Derek Riggs did the artwork for that one as well. The two singles, 2 Minutes to Midnight, they the band to fans to that album, as bands do. They release singles before the albums come out. In the UK, it reached number 2 on the charts. In the US, on the Billboard 200, it peaked at number 21. And that album was the one that introduced me to Iron Maiden. And after that one, I was, let's just say, I was intrigued uh, with Iron Maiden. On the next show, we will talk about 3 more albums, Somewhere in Time, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and No Prayer for the Dying. But until then, I want to thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot to me. And I hope you've enjoyed this series that I'm doing. I'm enjoying it, to say the very least. So until next time, take care of yourself and each other. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.